Hello, my name is Nell, and I have things to say. My dog also has things to say, apparently. There are cars outside, driving, on the road, and she's mad about that. So, just let her speak her piece. I did what I told everyone else to do. I've had a rough couple of weeks, really overwhelming, and I rested. I productively rested. I didn't push myself too much. I didn't overexert myself. I just rested. But now I want to get back onto working on my projects. And I'm doing that. Last night I started working on a blog post for one of the topics I'm going to be speaking about today. My plan is to film 2 videos. So, that felt really good. And I put on my face today, I'm ready for the world. I may be depressed, but I'm very well dressed. My illness is chronic, but my look is iconic. So today I'm going to be talking about invisible illness and invisible disability. First video, we'll be discussing what these things are and what it's like to live with them and why you shouldn't make judgments. And the second video will be about how even though my disability isn't invisible, somehow my illness still is. But we'll get to that. First things first, what is invisible illness and disability? You may have heard people talk about them, reference them, may have seen things on Facebook about them. Basically, invisible illnesses and disabilities are conditions such as mental health disorders, chronic illnesses, pain conditions, and the like that significantly impact somebody's ability to function, but they are not obviously visible from the outside. They are things that really hold people back from living life to the fullest in the typical ways, but you wouldn't know it by looking at them. These things can be really hard to deal with because you're not only dealing with the fact that your body isn't functioning the way you want it to, but you're also dealing with a whole lot of assumptions and judgments from other people simply because they can't see what's going on. And when they can't see what's going on, they fill in the gaps themselves, which is very dangerous. Now, I have been in a wheelchair for about 9 years now, and before that I was in a walking frame. But before that, I was still walking around, part-time using a walking stick, but I was still getting around. I probably looked able-bodied, but I was severely ill. My disability and my illness were invisible. So I had some first-hand experiences on how tough it is to live with those things. For example, I would walk into the disabled access toilet and I would get dirty looks and whispers. I might be waiting outside there and somebody would come out in a wheelchair and just look me up and down and just tut tut tut. Because I didn't look like I deserved to use that. The thing is, my legs were so weak at that point that if I sat down, I had a lot of trouble getting back up again. And toilets tend to be a little lower than regular chairs. So the only way I could use the toilet was if I had a railing to pull myself back up again. I had every right to use that toilet, but because somebody else couldn't see it, they automatically assumed that I didn't have that right. I received a mobility parking permit while I was still able to walk, because I couldn't walk more than about 100 meters without really risking my safety, which is one of the criteria for getting a disability parking permit. But the thing was, I would park, a 21-year-old person walking, and I would walk into the store and I would get whispers and judgments and comments. Mainly about how, you can't park there. Well, I have a permit. Well, you shouldn't have one. You look fine. They didn't realize that if I parked at the other end of the parking lot, then by the time I walked to the store, my legs would be like jelly. They also didn't realize that even parking in the disability spot, once I got inside the store, I would need to find a bench pretty damn quickly to gather my strength to continue what I was doing. They didn't see that, so they went straight for, you don't have the right for that. I started receiving the disability pension while I was still able to walk. And people had questions and comments and whispers. They thought that I just wasn't applying myself. That I thought that I was lazy. I should have been working. I should have been studying. They didn't realize that at that point my chronic fatigue was affecting my brain and concentration and focus weren't really doable. And I couldn't get myself to class. I couldn't be consistent in being at places. I could still hang out with friends, but that's because I could cancel without penalty. So that had a lot of questions. And the thing is, when people see something that they don't have the full answers for, they do fill in the gaps. And often, instead of going for compassion, they go for assumption. They look at something where they don't have the full picture and they automatically assume the worst. They see somebody walking into a disabled access toilet and they think, well, I can't see a reason for them using that, therefore there must not be a reason. Which is a deeply flawed way of viewing the world. And the thing is, a lot of people do this almost under the guise of standing up for the real disabled people. They'll police our facilities to make sure that no one unworthy is using them. But in the process, they are judging people by appearance, which doesn't help the disability community at all. We are already judged enough for our appearance. We don't need you doing the same thing. Looking disabled isn't a thing. You don't look disabled. Like, that's not a thing. Some people are obviously disabled, but disability doesn't have a look. And you can't judge the evidence or the existence of a disability by whether or not you can see it. That's just ridiculous. We're supposed to train our children not to judge by appearances, but adults still do it so often, and they do it angrily, and they do it self-righteously. And I'll tell you something. If you see somebody parking in a disability parking spot and you think they shouldn't be there, then there are two scenarios. Number one, yeah, they shouldn't be there. And you telling them off isn't going to make them stop doing that. And number two, they do deserve to be there, and you telling them that they don't deserve to be there is just going to make them even more anxious and ashamed anytime they leave the house. There's no good outcome there. And when it comes to disability parking spots, it's not your job to police that. That's the parking inspector. I would encourage you, if you see somebody using a disability facility and you hear somebody saying they shouldn't be using that, that's supposed to be for the disabled people, maybe just comment and say, well, maybe they have a condition we don't know about. Let's spread education and awareness instead of assumption. One instance where I think you have every right to judge people is if you have a friend and you know for certain that they have absolutely no reason to use disability facilities, and then you hear them going, oh, I'll just nip into the disability parking spot, I won't be long, or there was a long line at the toilet, so I'm just going to use the disability toilet. That's a situation where you can say, dude, no. Do you have a reason for using that? Because if not, you're taking up a place that is actually reserved for somebody. If you use the disability toilet and you don't have a reason to, there could be somebody with bladder issues risking wetting themselves because you just couldn't be bothered to wait. If you are parking in the disability parking spot simply because you just want to do something in a hurry, there's somebody who now cannot get into the store because they need that spot. So if you know for certain that somebody has absolutely no reason, then yeah, make a comment and be like, that's not okay. That's not okay. But if you don't know the story, don't make judgments. Compassion first. Assumptions, throw them out the window. They're useless. People with invisible disabilities and illnesses have enough on their plate without carrying your judgments as well. So just have a bit of heart. Policing it isn't your job, and it only harms. And if you have an invisible illness or an invisible disability, baby, I see you. You're valid. Your experiences are valid. I know you're trying your best. You're doing good. Just keep trucking. Okay, that's all for this one. Bless.